Okay, so with that in mind, we're going to be installing these components today, so let's get building. Let's go. Let's go. You know when you get into a Netflix series or something that is releasing in like weekly uploads, but then you waited until it's like all out and you just binge watch it the whole time? Yeah. I've been binging the show called Beef, and it's incredible. I'm on episode 5 right now, but I would have made this video earlier if I haven't been binging the show, but I'm gonna stop here. Blah blah blah. All that's out the window. So right now we're gonna get on with the build. So this is what we're building today. We're gonna be installing more of the flight controller aspects of this build. So we're gonna be installing a beeper for sure, because on my Nazgul I don't have a beeper on at the moment, and if you're flying in a field of grasses or in like a grove of trees or somewhere that has that makes it very hard for you to find your quad if you lose it or you disarm, this is gonna be your friend. This little thing is a beeper and it makes a loud ass beep, and I'm for sure gonna put one on this as well as the Nazgul, because I'm sick of like just walking around finding it for like an hour or so. Okay, so yeah, we're gonna be installing a beeper on there. So with that in mind, we'll put the beeper aside for now. We also will need to install the flight controller, which is the other half of this beautiful kit by Speedybee. And last but not least, we're also going to be installing the Runcam Vista. So this is what allows you to see into the goggles. Either way, we're going to install these components here today. So let's get on with it, shall we? Let's go. All right, so now that we had the intro out of the way, we can put away the frame, because today we are not doing anything with the frame aside from maybe the final section of this video, because we have to prepare the flight controller that's going to be being inserted here and being inserted into this with this little plug. So right now we don't have anything to do with the frame. We can just because right now we really don't have anything else to do with the frame. So we can just yeet, right? Perfect. Okay, so the first component that you're gonna need is your Speedybee F405 flight controllers. You're not gonna take that out just yet. You're just gonna remove the foam portion, because we're gonna need a little bit of pieces and, you know, the general stuff from the very bottom. So now that we finally opened the box, what you're gonna need is this little baggie of like a sort of nut, screw and stuff, because you're gonna need these to screw on the flight controller later. So we can put that aside. I'm gonna put it aside with the quad because that's in the final assembly. Besides that little baggie, that's all we're gonna need, because we're not gonna need this little plug-in cable. You can use it if you want. The Speedybee flight controller does have plug-in support for Vistas, but you never want to trust these plugs, as in a bad crash they can come unplugged or anything and you just won't know because you don't check the internals when you're out flying in the field. So we're going to directly solder it onto the pads onto the flight controller, just so that it's more intact and more trustworthy. Okay, so now you have your flight controller, right? That's what you're gonna need. We will be preparing this for solder in just a minute. What else you're gonna need is all your components. So stuff like your ELRS communications or your Crossfire, whatever protocol you're using, you're gonna need the RX communications with that, which is something I did forget to go get. So I'm gonna get that after I finish this section. But you're also going to need your other components, so your Vista or whatever analog, whatever you're building. I'm using a Vista because I'm all HD, baby. Digital is the life to go. You need to try it. And a beeper, obviously. Either way, just get your components ready, because we're going to get some soldering now. So let's get soldering now. Okay, so up next. Okay, so right now I do want to point out on the sections or the pads that we will be soldering. If you didn't watch my Nazgul video, I went into more detail about what pads which component needs. This is very similar. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be soldering the pads that I'm going to be pointing out on the screen right now. So we're going to be using the 9-volt pad in the back, the ground, T1 and R1. That's all the pads we're going to be using for the Vista. So with the buzzer, there's just 2 wires to the buzzer, which is very, very easy. So on the board, you'll see 2 pads. You'll see something saying BZ plus and BZ negative. Those are the 2 pads you're going to need for your beepers. And last but not least, we're going to be running an ELRS RX component. Okay, so we're going to be soldering this on as well. I'll take it out as we do. It's just like the Nazgul build. So if you want a more in-depth version of how to solder this stuff or how it works or anything like that, be sure to check out the Nazgul builds video. All right, so the first component that we're going to be soldering today is the Runcam Link or whatever, Vista if you want to call it, because that's the most common name. So the reason why I'm starting with this is actually the most difficult part to solder on. So we're going to be soldering using the inside of these, but it's really hard because it's like inside a crevice, and that's why I'm going to be starting with the Vista, because it requires so much more attention than the other components. So we're going to install the ELRS RX, and that's this little pad that allows your controller to communicate with the quad so you can control it, and so on, so on, so on. We're going to be using the wire loom from the Speedybee. I'm just going to be cutting the plug here and the plug here and just using the wires here. So we're going to be using red, black, yellow, and white just to keep everything simple. We're going to solder the cables to the RX. First things first, we're going to get our bearings. So I'm just going to describe this as best as I can because it's like really hard to see right now. So with the LED light, if you have the same ELRS RX board or something similar, they all have the same layout, the same pad, so it should be okay. That is your boot button, okay? So I want you to rotate it so that it's in the top left corner away from yourself. And from there, you have the various following pads. I'll put it on a diagram here. So your top pad here across from the boot button, don't ever mess with the boot button. Your top pad here is your ground. Then the pad that is right underneath it is your power, so that's your 5 volt. The pad right here is your TX, right? And your RX pad. So we're just going to get solder on these, and then we're going to get cables on these, and then we're going to install it into the actual quad. Okay, so now that we have everything all soldered up, we have the Vista all wired up. There's wires everywhere. We have our components wired up. We can actually move to the flight controller time. About time. Yes, I know. So with this step, you have two choices. Number one, you can either solder straight onto the frame, or you can solder straight from your bench or desk, whatever surface you're working on. I, for one, like for component soldering, I do it outside of the frame because there's more space and it's more tighter. But for any board, any flight controller or ESC soldering, I like to do it inside the frame. So I'm actually going to put the stack in the frame and we're going to solder it that way. It's all the same. At the end of the day, as long as the wires here have a strong connection, that's all that matters, because these wires and components will be having a lot of oscillations from vibrations from the motor, crashes, impacts, etc., etc. So you want to make sure you got a strong connection. So I'm gonna get this frame from over there, throw this baby in, and then start preparing the board for solder. Then we're gonna start laying our components, trimming the wires from these components that we have been soldering all video. And we're just gonna start laying wires in and then plugging the flight controller in, and before you know it, we're on the last step of this video. Almost there, almost there. Alright, so let's get started. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this out of the box, so just like this, and put that aside. So the way you want to mount your flight controller, you can't mount it, well, you can mount it anyway, but it becomes a hassle in beta flight later when you're trying to set up stuff. So on the flight controller, there's an arrow, right? That arrow always has to face to the front where your camera is. So right now, this arrow is facing that way, so it has to face the front because these are where this is where the camera is gonna sit, and the slits are right here. So we're just gonna mount it like that. For you, when you're gonna be, so for you, your view will be like this, basically. Alright, so now has come the time of where we're going to put in our flight components. So first thing first, I'm going to start off with the Runcam Vista or Link, whatever you want to call it. And we're just going to run it straight like this. Oh shit, does the camera shroud not fit? Okay, we're going to leave that for now. We'll worry about it when it comes to final assembly. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the flight controller out and plug in this pin before we continue any further, because it's going to be a hassle to plug in later on when we got all these wires running through. Actually, no. What we're going to do, we're going to set that down. And what I like to do is I like to run this camera wire underneath everything so it's out of the way. So we're actually going to pull it out a little bit just to stretch out the wire. And basically that is where our Vista is going to sit, just like that. So later when we're done the soldering, I'm going to put a zip tie and duct tape on the bottom of it just to keep it intact. Now we're gonna take the flight controller and we're gonna plug it in. Be careful because this pin is really fragile. Just be careful at this stage because you don't want to wreck your Speedybee F405. Now we can throw this back onto the stack screws. So there you go. Make sure all four is in. And we're gonna install our Vistas. So now we're going to be moving on to the beeper. So the beeper is just a positive and a negative wire. So it's just a black and red. So we're going to be putting that on these two pads up here. So with your red wire, you want to put that on BZ positive, which is the inner pad. And your black one will be BZ negative, which is on the outside. So the one closest to the stack screw. Alright, so that is your beeper installed as well. Okay, so we're just going to set everything down just the way it is. I'm going to move the wires over so we can solder the ELRS. Okay, so there we go. Now with the ELRS chip, it's going to go something like this. So we're just going to strip, tin, and put them in. Alright, so we're finally done with all our soldering. Make sure this is off. Don't burn yourself. Okay, so we're finally finished soldering. So right now we have wires going everywhere. And it doesn't look too good, you know, but all the components are already soldered in. It's ready to work, and it just needs a little bit tidying up. Okay, so the final assembly is going to be in 2 more videos, I believe, because short of soldering all this on and actually getting it in and making it work, we do have to flash the certain components like the flight controller, we have to update it to beta flight 4.3. I believe I'm going to use that because I have 4.3 on the other quad. So just to keep everything together and on the same versions, I'm just going to do 4.3. And then we have to flash BlueJay on the ESC. So next video we will be doing all the software updates and the software side of things when building a quad. Okay, so I'm just gonna end off the video because I'm gonna keep babbling on and on and on. I'm gonna clean up. I'm gonna watch some more episodes of Beef. Be sure to watch that. If you're watching the series or you watched it, drop a comment what you liked about it in the comments below. Alright, so I'm out of here. See ya. Peace.